I welcome all of you to the class. In today's class, we'll be starting from a very important series of lectures on the theories of failure. As far as the theories of failure are concerned, we should say they are the criteria of failure which give us an idea when a machine component or a structural element will fail. When we say the structural element or a machine component fails, we essentially do not mean that the machine element or the structural component breaks into two or more than two parts. We don't mean it. We mean that the machine element should always perform the required work. It should suffice its purpose. It should not deform. The alteration of geometry should not be there, because if there is an alteration of geometry, maybe there is locking of the two machine elements, or there is production of noise. Production of noise or the generation of noise in a mechanism is also known as failure of the mechanism. For example, look into your electric fan. The purpose of the electric fan is to whirl or swirl the air, to decrease the temperature of the air. But if the electric fan is making noise, then this electric fan will not be used. So we say that electric fan fails to suffice its purpose. It's failing to suffice its purpose. It does not do what it's meant to do. Though it's decreasing the temperature of air by swirling the air, but at the same time, the noise is causing disturbance. It's causing discomfort. Okay. The purpose of the fan is to reduce the environmental or the atmospheric discomfort, but it's causing another discomfort. So this fan has failed to suffice its purpose. In the same way, you talk about the automobile. If an automobile engine is making noise, it will not be used. Whatever beats efficiency or performance. Fine. So when we talk about the failure essentially does not mean the product, the structural element or the machine component that does not do work or it breaks. By saying that the machine element has failed, it means it has deformed. Its dimensions have changed. Fine. Or we say that it can also break. If a machine element it breaks up, then we say it has failed. But breaking only does not mean failure. Failure also means deformation, because associated with the deformation, associated with the change in the dimensions is associated noise and other factors that cause discomfort to the system. Okay. Now the question is, when do the structural elements or the machine components fail? When do they fail? Many theories have been proposed that dictate to us when the structural elements or the machine components fail. We'll be talking about 5 important theories. We'll be talking about the maximum principal stress theory, what is known as the Rankine theory as well. We'll be talking about the maximum shear stress theory, that's called Weierstrass theory. We'll be talking about maximum principal strain theory, that's called Sand-Winans principle. We'll be calling total strain energy per unit volume theory, that's called High theory. And the last one, shear strain energy per unit volume, that's called Maxwell-Huber or von Mises theory. So essentially, when we will be talking about the failure of the materials, we'll be having 2 types of materials in hand. Maybe we have a ductile material in hand, or we have a brittle material in hand. So we have 2 types of materials. We have a ductile material and a brittle material. So when we have to understand the failure, we have to understand the failure of a ductile material and the failure of a brittle material, because the failure of ductile material is different as compared to the failure of the brittle material. Their failure phenomena are different. Fine. Now, in fact, different ductile materials show different failure behaviors. That's one more problem for us. So it means if you are having three ductile materials, like you have cast iron, you have aluminium, and you have copper. These three ductile materials will have three different failure behaviors. Fine. And when you compare a ductile material with a brittle material like glass, the failure of ductile material differs from the failure of the brittle material. So the problem is complicated. And then predicting the failures is very important. We should know when the things will fail. Making a bridge, making a beam, columns, truss. Before we make all these structural elements, or you make machine components, like you make a gear, you make a shaft, you make a coupling, screw jack, so on and so forth. A designer or a mechanical engineer should be knowing when it's going to fail. Okay, why we should know when this machine element is going to fail? The reason for it is, if we don't know when it's going to fail, we cannot restrict those loading conditions that can cause the failure. For example, we know maximum carrying capacity of passengers for an Airbus is, say, for example, 250 people. And an average weight of persons in this part of the world is around 60 kg. So 250 people will have weight 250 multiplied by 60 multiplied by 9.81 Newton. This will be the total weight of the person. This will be the total weight of the passengers in an Airbus. Then you will be having the dead weight, like the weight of the components of the aircraft, plus the weight of the luggage. You have to add that up. So you will be having a figure in hand that this is the weight currently of this aircraft. Now, if the weight exceeds the maximum weight that this aircraft can withstand, then you cannot have a safe flight. Fine. So if it's said that right now we are having 70 ton of weight, we are having 70 ton total weight of the aircraft, including passengers and luggage. So we should have one more figure in hand with which we should compare it. The maximum weight it can withstand is, say, for example, 60 ton, then it's fine. So this 60 ton is a figure in hand with which we are comparing our current data. And the comparison gives us an idea whether we are safe or not. Fine. So this is what these failure theories are giving us. All these failure theories, in fact, we are having one more failure theory for ductile materials, which we'll be taking after we finish these 5 theories. These all theories will give you the data. They will give you the information about the values of stresses or the strains or the energy per unit volume which a material possesses when the material undergoes failure. For getting me on? So these theories actually gives us the guidelines to design the machine components, structural elements, so that the machine components or the structural elements do not fail. While we are taking these theories one by one, we'll be having two approaches of dealing with these theories. One will be the numerical approach, the mathematical approach, that is playing with the formulas. What is the formula for maximum principal stress theory? What is the formula, say, for the total shear strain energy per unit volume theory, so on and so forth. We'll be doing one is the theoretical analysis or the numerical analysis, we should say. So first of all, we'll take the numerical analysis. And after finishing the numerical analysis, we'll take the what's known as a graphical analysis. That's very important. The graphical analysis of the theories of failure. The graphical analysis of the theories of failure. That's also important. So when we talk about the theories of failure, we'll be having two analyses in hand. We'll be talking about the numerical analysis, and then we'll be going to the graphical analysis, graphically saying what does these theories actually represent. What is the graphical representation of these theories? So let's first of all talk about the maximum principal stress theory or the Rankine theory. As the name suggests, this theory, the first one, the maximum principal stress theory, has something to do with the maximum stress that is generated in the machine element when the machine element fails. Fine. So what it is, the first theory, the maximum principal stress theory, says This theory assumes that when the maximum principal stress in the complex stress system reaches the elastic limit stress in simple tension, failure occurs. So this theory gives us an idea about the failure. When the failure occurs, it says when you are subjecting a machine element to a simple tensile test, we know a tensile test which we do in a UTM, fine, where the necking of the machine element happens and finally the machine element breaks. So when the machine element breaks, or when the deformation in the machine element begins, when the yielding starts, because when the yielding starts, when the yielding stress is approached, that is the point when the deformation begins, the necking starts. Are you getting me or not? So when the stress in the machine element, when the principal stress, because we are having, if it's a two-dimensional state of stress, we always know the principal stresses are sigma 1 and sigma 2. In three-dimensional state of stress, we are having sigma 1, sigma 2 and sigma 3 as a three principal stresses. When we say, since in Mohr circle construction we were talking about the biaxial state of stress or the plane state of stress, where we essentially saw sigma 1 and sigma 2, where sigma 1 was equal sigma x plus sigma y divided by 2 plus under root of sigma x minus sigma y divided by 2 whole square plus tau xy square. Fine. That was one of the principal stresses. And second principal stress was sigma x plus sigma y divided by 2 minus under root of sigma x minus sigma y divided by 2 whole square plus tau xy square. And we definitely said that the two principal stresses, sigma 1 and sigma 2, is that state of stress, is that value of stress in the machine element, which is sigma 1 is the maximum stress generated and sigma 2 is the minimum stress generated. The maximum and the minimum stresses which are generated in the machine element are represented by sigma 1 and sigma 2, what we call as the principal stresses. Are you getting me or not? So essentially we know that these principal stresses are the maximum or the minimum values of the stresses. Is this fine? Now if you say that sigma 1 is one of the principal stresses and is the maximum principal stress, because principal stress in a biaxial state of stress can be maximum or minimum. Now if we say that sigma 1 is the maximum principal stress, and in a tensile test, if this sigma 1 becomes equal to the yield stress, what happens to the machine element? The yielding begins, isn't it? So the machine element is already having the value of the stress, that's called the yield stress, at which the yielding begins. So when you are subjecting your machine element to what? To a tensile test, and the external stress applied becomes equal to the yield stress, what happens? The yielding begins. So this criteria says that apart from the tensile test, if you have a machine element, if this machine element is subjected to a stress sigma 1 such that sigma 1 becomes equal to sigma y, then this machine element fails. The yielding begins. There are two things that this theory wants to talk. First of all, this theory says that in a tensile test, when the yielding happened, at that time the stress was how much? Sigma y. Now take this machine element, don't subject this machine element to the tensile test, but subject it to a stress of sigma 1 such that sigma 1 is equal to sigma y. Again the machine element will fail. So this theory tells us that the stress during the working conditions of the machine element should not be equal to sigma y. If sigma becomes equal to sigma y, then the yielding will happen. Are you getting me on? So always and always in a state of stress, whether it is a two-dimensional state of stress, one or three-dimensional state of stress, the maximum principal stress should never be equal to the yield stress of the machine element. If that becomes equal to the yield stress of the machine element, what happens? The failure begins. What failure begins? The deformation starts. Elastic deformation begins. Are you getting me or not? And the deformation happens in the form of yielding. The necking happens. Dimensions start changing, which we do not want. Now, two important things from the maximum principal stress theory. That's why this is known as the maximum principal stress theory. Maximum principal. That is the maximum stress in a machine element should never exceed what? It should never exceed yield stress. If it exceeds the yield stress or becomes equal to the yield stress, what happens? The failure begins. So what is the criteria then? So in other words, we should say the criteria states that whenever a machine element is subjected to a state of stress, that state of stress should not exceed the value of the yield stress of that material. If that happens, the deformation begins. Now, not only this, sometimes, as I stated, sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma 3, they are the principal stresses. Now, let's suppose one of the stresses, one among these three stresses, sigma 1, sigma 2, and sigma 3, exceeds the compressive strength of the machine element. Because we don't only subject the machine elements to tensile loads, they are often subjected to the compressive loads as well. Are you getting me or not? So machine elements do undergo what type of loading as well? The compressive loads. During compression, what happens when the stress becomes equal to the yield stress? Again, the failure happens. So the criteria deals with both the tensile test as well as the compressive test. It states that in case of tensile test, any of the value of the normal stress should not be equal to or greater than the yield stress, where this sigma 1 is the normal stress or the tensile stress. But if out of the combination of stresses generated in the machine element, sigma 1, sigma 2, and sigma 3, one of the stresses, say for example sigma 3, happens to be the compressive stress, then this compressive stress sigma 3 should also not be equal to the sigma y yield strength of the machine element, but during compression, not during tension. Fine. If this is equal to this, then the machine element will fail due to yielding, but under compression. So it means whatever be the stresses generated in the machine element, both the tensile and the compressive stresses should not exceed the value of the yield strength values under tension or compression respectively. Are you getting me? This theory is having some limitations, as we did in case of the tensile test. When we were doing our tensile test in mechanics of materials 1, we realized that the failure was not taking place exactly on a normal plane. It was taking place on a shear plane, which was at an angle of 45 degree with the plane of the machine element. That is, let me share a screen with you. We had a machine element like this. Fine. This machine element was subject to tensile load in this direction. It was clamped at the bottom. When it was clamped at the bottom, so you had a reaction load in the downward direction as well. And you must have realized there that the failure plane was, it was like this small plane, such that this plane was at an angle of, 45 degree. Okay, fine. Okay, so as far as these failures are concerned, these failures happen on this plane, what I also stated in that very class as they are called Luder's planes or Luder's lines. If you see the old structures in this valley, most of the structures actually slip. Okay, and the slipping is across these planes. Okay, these are called Luder's plane. So slipping happens on a plane of 45 degree. On this plane of 45 degree, this external load you can resolve. So you can resolve. This will be 90 minus 45. This also will be 45. Okay. Okay. So you'll be having one component in this direction and another component in this direction. So if this is normal component on this plane, this will be the shear component on this plane. So failure on this plane is not only caused by the normal component, it's caused by the shear component. But if you look at the maximum principal stress theory, it takes into consideration only the normal stresses. It does not talk about the shear stresses. Okay. So this is one of the limitations of this theory. In fact, the foremost limitation of this theory is that it does not talk about the shear stresses. It's silent about it. That's why this theory is not most often used. Okay, this theory gives us the values of that. It gives us an idea that the stresses should not exceed the the yield stress. The normal stresses in the machine element should not exceed the yield stress, but it is having some limitations. Now, removing the limitations is maximum shear stress theory. Fine. So normal stress theory was talking about maximum principal stress theory was talking about the maximum normal stresses. Fine. Now, removing those limitations is the second theory known as the maximum shear stress theory. So during the failures, the machine element will be subjected to what you call as the shear stresses as well. Okay. So the maximum shear stress theory gives us the idea about the failure of the machine. Fine. Now, what does this theory state? Again, this theory is very much what we can say. This theory is having the same statement as the statement of the maximum shear stress theory. Okay. This theory is having the same statement as the maximum principal stress theory, except for the fact that instead of principal stress, it talks about the shear stress. This theory states that failure can be assumed to occur when the maximum shear stress in the complex stress system, we are talking about the complex stress system. Complex stress system means where you are having the three-dimensional state of system. Okay. This theory states that the failure can be assumed to occur when the maximum shear stress in the complex stress system becomes equal to that at the yield point in the simple tensile test. So again, it means take a sample, subject this sample to a tensile test. Fine. When you subject this machine element to the tensile test, observe the yield point. When the yielding happens, calculate the value of shear stress at that very. Calculate the value of shear stress when the yielding in the machine element happens in the tensile test. So you had a specimen. This specimen we subjected to what? This specimen we subjected to the tensile test. When the yielding happened, we calculated the value of the yield stress. We calculated the value of the shear stress. Fine. Then make a statement that this machine element, when used for any operation, should not be subjected to a shear stress exceeding the value of the shear stress tau yielding. You got the statement or not? Statement is quite easy. The machine element was subjected to what? Tensile test. So when the yielding happened, we calculated the value of the shear stress on the plane on which the yielding started. So the value of the shear stress during experiment was tau yielding, for example. Fine. Then you will make a statement that you can make use of this machine element as long as the shear stresses in this does not exceed this value of tau yielding, because this tau yielding was the value of the stress in the machine element when the machine element started yielding. Are you getting me or not? So how we calculate this tau yielding when the machine element is subjected to the tensile tests? Are you getting me or not? We know during any state of, during the biaxial state of stress, we know the value of the tau maximum is 1/2 sigma 1 minus sigma 2. If you recall the Mohr circle construction, this value of 1/2 sigma 1 minus sigma 2 is the value of the maximum shear stress in the machine element. And this maximum value of the shear stress should not be equal to or should not exceed the value of the shear stress during yielding. For most of the ductile materials, the value of the shear stress at yielding is half of the normal stress, half of the yielding stress, half of the normal yielding stress. Fine. So you can make the statement that 1/2 of sigma 1 minus sigma 2 should, if it becomes equal to 1/2 sigma y, the machine element fails. Are you getting me or not? This is what the theory also states. This is what the theory also states. That's over here. That is sigma 1 minus sigma 3. Here we are taking sigma 3 into consideration. Why sigma 3 into consideration? Because sigma 1 is maximum, sigma 2 is minimum. If sigma 3 is the minimum, no problem. That is sigma 1 minus sigma 3 represents the maximum differences between the normal stresses. Fine. In case of biaxial state of stress, it is sigma 2. In case of 3 dimension, it is sigma 3. But essentially, it has to be the maximum stress minus the smallest of all these 3 stresses. Then if this criteria is satisfied, then the machine element fails, and the failure is predicted by what? Maximum shear stress theory. So what do you want in a machine element? So you are having two theories. One of the theory you had that the maximum normal stress, if becomes equal to yield, it fails. Second is if the shear stress, if sigma 1 minus sigma 2 becomes equal to sigma y, it fails. Fine. Doesn't this mean that this sigma 1 is to be reduced by some factor, and this sigma 1 minus sigma 2 is also to be reduced by some factor? Fine. So that they do not become equal to sigma y. The factor by which these values are to be reduced, will be very shortly calling them as the factor of safety. This is very important. We'll be calling that as the factor of safety. Factor of safety is quite known. We say it is a two-wheeler. Our motorbike is a two-wheeler, but 3 persons ride on the bike, but the bike does not fail. Fine. 6 persons, you are having some kids on the fuel tank as well, 2-3 kids on the fuel tank, and rest of the family on the back seat. Nothing happens. The bike does not fail. Why? Because when you are telling your customer it is a it's for 2 passengers, you are actually putting up a factor of safety. It's actually made for 6 passengers, but you are actually reducing the factor by telling him that it's only for 2 passengers, because you know he's going to abuse the machine. If you tell him it's for 2 passengers, he will use it for 3. If you tell him that it's for 3, he will use it for 4. Are you getting me or not? So that's how things actually work. As a practicing engineer, these things are to be kept into consideration. Fine. The third theory, which we have to talk in much detail, that's called maximum principal strain theory. See, the first two theories, the maximum shear stress theory and the maximum principal stress theory, they were talking about the maximum values of the stresses, whether a normal stress or a shear stress generated in the machine element when the machine element undergoes the yielding. But we know when the machine element undergoes yielding, at that time, in other words, we should say that the machine element undergoes some deformation. Fine. So the deformation, if you have a machine element, this machine element subjected to a tensile test, then essentially you will be having what you call as, you will be having what you just decided, that you will be having the maximum principal stress or the maximum shear stress in the machine element. And based on these values, we defined our, we defined the failure criteria. But if the machine element is subjected to a normal stress sigma 1, or it's subjected to a shear stress tau max, such that sigma 1 is equal to sigma y and tau max is also equal to sigma y, then we know the yielding will happen. Yielding happens means the deformation will be there. So there will be some change in length. There will be not change in length, I should say there will be some change in dimensions. There will be the dimensional change. Fine. If we calculate, if we measure that dimensional change, that happens in the machine element when the machine element undergoes yielding, then we should say that if the machine element is subjected to this amount of the deformation, then the machine element will undergo the failure. Let me repeat. Let's again take the machine element under tensile test, like this. So when we apply normal stress in the machine element, equal to the yield, then the deformation in the machine element occurs. Say for example, the deformation of 0.1 mm happens. We can say, in other words, we will hide these values. We will say if this machine element is subjected to a deformation of 0.1 mm, then this machine element will fail. How do we know this is going to fail? Because at this value of the deformation, the stress generated is equal to the yield stress. Are you getting me? So it's now one and the same thing, whether we are talking in terms of the stress or we are talking in terms of the deformation. So the maximum principle, this theory, the third theory which we are talking is the maximum principle strain theory. The maximum theory, this theory assumes that this theory assumes that the failures happen. This theory assumes, over here. This theory assumes that failure occurs when the maximum strain in the complex stress system equals that at the yield point in the tensile test. Are you getting me or not? This is fine. Now, in case of the tensile test, if the machine element is subjected to stress in this direction, sigma 1, yield Young's modulus of elasticity of the material is, say, for example, E. How much will be the strain in this direction? That will be sigma 1 by E. Stress by Young's modulus is the strain. How much will be the strain in this direction? Sigma 2. That will be equal to Poisson's ratio nu sigma 2 divided by E. You are subjecting a machine element to a three-dimensional state of stress, sigma 1, sigma 2, and sigma 3. How much will be the strain in direction 1? It will be strain in direction 1 because of stress, sigma 1 will be equal to sigma 1 by E. Strain in direction 1 because of stress in direction 2 will be equal to Poisson's ratio times sigma 2 divided by E. And strain in direction 1 because of stress in direction 3 will be equal to Poisson's ratio times sigma 3 divided by E. That will be if this total strain becomes equal to the strain in the machine element during yielding, that is sigma y by E, then the failure will happen. Now we are talking about this new Poisson's ratio. Okay, we already know this, that if you subject a machine element to a stress in this direction like sigma 1 and sigma 2, let me talk only these, then stress along one direction will be, strain along direction 1 will be sigma 1 by E. And this sigma 2 will also cause a strain in direction 1, isn't it? This is direction 1, this is direction 2. How it can cause a strain in direction 1? If you have a stress in direction 2, then it will decrease the length of this machine element, isn't it? So because of sigma 2, you will have a strain in direction 1, and the effect of stress in direction 2 in the direction 1, or the effect of stress in direction 1 in direction 2 is represented by what? Poisson's ratio. Okay, and we often say that Poisson's ratio nu is equal lateral strain by longitudinal strain, that is sigma 2 by sigma 1. That's how you define it. Okay, so nu sigma 2, as far as this sigma 1 by E is concerned, this is strain along direction 1. Sigma 2 by E, this is strain along direction 2. But what will be the strain along direction 1? You have to multiply it by Poisson's ratio. In the same way, and minus, because its effect will be opposite. And in the same way, what will be the strain in the direction 3? It will be sigma 3 by E. What will be its direction? What will be its effect in direction 1? You have to multiply it by the Poisson's ratio. So this entire gives you the strain along the direction 1. If this becomes equal strain sigma y by E, then the machine element will fail. Therefore, if you remove these E's, this is the criteria that is known as the maximum principal strain criteria. And you always have to make sure that the left hand side is less than the right hand side, that this value should never and never and never become equal to the yield value. Otherwise, the machine element will fail. Apart from this, we are having the fourth theory, that's called maximum total strain energy per unit volume, which we'll be taking up hopefully in the next class.